Good evening and salutations with my Beyond the Gates friends. Yeah, I had to pause because I'm like, there's so many soaps I watch. There's so many soaps I watch, but I've been meaning to sit there and do a review on the show in a hot minute. I've kind of missed doing it in some senses, and maybe tonight I'll get into more reasons why I haven't done a review. But, one thing I would sit there and say about yesterday's episode, are just the conversations which, like, let's say yesterday, Samantha, Chelsea, and Kat. One of the things I would sit there and say is that they talk like real young adults, real teenagers in a sense. The problem is that they talk like young adults and teenagers in a sense. It is annoying to sit there. You ever sat there and just been in a mall or like been in a grocery store or whatever and hear a teenager talk and it's like I would rather jam a screwdriver in my goddamn ears than to sit there and listen to how they talk. It is so annoying. It is so irritating. The words that they use. One of the influencers was saying BTW. I'm like, why are you talking in text for? Why are you doing that for? Not to mention that you just look like an idiot, but sometimes I just sit there and wonder who is this show marketed towards. Like, I get it's supposed to bring in a young crowd and everything, but soap operas are legendarily known for an older crowd in a sense. And a lot of the stuff that they talk about, social media and influencers and Instagram and TikTok dances, you honestly think that people like my grandmother want to sit there and listen to that? I barely want to sit there and listen to that, and I do all those things. I kind of had to get that stuff out before we talked about today's episode. Chelsea wanted to sit there and ask Danny to be her marketing manager, and Danny says no. And she seems like she's kind of hurt and crushed in a sense. I'm like, boo, you just made that big ass speech you've been talking about for days, how you don't want your momager to sit there and work with you. And now you seem super disappointed that she's like, no. Now she gives a ton of exposition on why. And it's one of two answers. While I think all that stuff was nice and maybe some of it might have been necessary, I'm kind of sitting there saying, why didn't you just get to part two of the answer, which is that she wants to open up her own model agency? You could have just sat there and just led with that. But no, we have to sit there and find ways to stretch out a scene. So we get all that, and then we get the other part. Okay, sure. Then they do this little fashion pictures thing or whatever for their marketing with Danny and Pam and Andre and everything. It's a little fun fluff scene. Didn't really do much for me, but whatever. Again, we gotta find ways to sit there and stretch out the clock. Okay? We got Doug and Andre. Now Andre asked him to do a documentary about his injury and his hand and how he's doing and how he wants to sit there and recover. And at first he snaps at him, but then he tells him the legit reason why. He also talks about why he loves doing surgery. That is an adrenaline one, just kind of like tightrope walking or whatever. Right? Again, most of that stuff is kind of fluff, but we do learn a little bit about him and why he likes surgery. So I'll take it. But Andre, the nice guy that he is, picks up a lotto ticket and gives it to Doug and says, you know what, listen, you've earned some good luck. Doug scratches it, wins 50K. Tells Randy. And Randy's like, oh, this is awesome. You can sit there and use this to sit there and pay off Joey. Doug's like, or I can double it. I mean, come on. I mean, this is luck right there. Lady Luck is not there yelling my name. I'm about to sit there and answer. Randy's like, Bro. Now, technically, his child and ex-girlfriend's life is on the line. He should sit there and be like, rah, 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 go and do it, bro. Go and do it. But he doesn't. He's like, nah, man, you don't want to do it. He convinces him to do it. Now, he gets a call later on, or at first he calls him, and Randy doesn't pick up. I'm like, Randy, you ain't paying your position. I guess you're just gonna sit there and take Joey for a fool. Like he's not gonna make good on his promise. Okay? But he does eventually talk to him, and Randy's like, yeah, you lost pretty much all of it. It's all gone. So, and then he hangs up the phone on Doug, and he's disappointed. I don't know if, my thing is, I don't know if that's what actually happened or if he lied to him. Made me sit there and think about it. But if it's true, well, Doug, you just made another stupid mistake in a long list of stupid mistakes that you have been making since I've been watching the show. But they're interesting. So, cool. Joey wants to get involved in the sense in Vanessa's business as far as some sort of new venture or whatever. And Vanessa's intrigued. Now I feel like she's more intrigued not because of that, but because of Joey. There's a point that they're talking, they're sitting there and they're being really close and cozy. I don't understand how Doug actually walked into that place and didn't see them, but okay, sure. But he does see them. He does sit there and see them, and he ain't happy. Now he's not mad, but I can imagine somebody being that close to your wife, your significant other, you're not gonna be too happy. You see them a little bit too cozy. Like I don't like that. What you doing, bro? Now, while Vanessa's sitting there talking to Joey, you sit there, or at least I sit there and think, okay, they're gonna go back to his apartment, and she's gonna be banging Joey, and you see it, and she's banging Doug. And I'm like, wow, okay, that's good. Being with your man, your husband, and everything like that, that's cool. And I also sat there and I looked at it from Doug's position. I was like, bro, first of all, let me just tell you something. There's not much. It's okay. Let's put it this way. It's very rare when I'm not in the mood. Okay? The only time that that's really happened is when I've had the flu. I had well during the epidemic. I think I might have actually had that. Oh, fuck it, COVID. I'm not gonna sit there and try to dance around that. And I think I had it. Or if I'm sad about something. Those are the only two times where I'm not in the mood. I don't understand how you actually saw those two together and were just like, I think I need to sit there and have some words with my wife. Nah, screw it. Let's just sit there and let's just do it. Or I lost a shit ton of money, but still he was just like, nah, let's do it. What? I was so confused by that scene. Maybe he'll sit there and talk about it. He'll talk to her after. If it was me, yeah, no, that wouldn't have been a talk about it afterwards. That would have definitely been a talk about it before situation. You got that. Yeah, afterwards, Chelsea meeting up with you know the couple, have some drinks, talking about doing some other stuff afterwards. I hope that this story goes somewhere other than she is bisexual. Okay, I hope it goes somewhere other than that because we've seen them at the bar and then that's been about it. Now, one of the things that people have said and complained about is there's too much sex scenes. It's called loving in the goddamn afternoon. I don't understand like what are people not getting about that? Maybe they feel it's going to be too much of a controversial scene. Go back and Days of Our Lives, their threesome. it still had people losing their minds. Let's be honest. They only lost their minds because it was two of the same sexes. They don't tend to lose their minds when it's a straight couple. And I think that's what will wind up happening if they do show that scene. Yeah, marvelous scene. But I would love to sit there and see the backstory or see something with them more. Like, what are like, what kind of conflicts are they going to have? You know what I'm saying? Like, is Danny going to sit there and have an issue? Like, show me that because it just seems like they have a scene like that. They show it and then that's it. And it just seems like it's almost kind of pointless to see that. Like, she could have sat there and talked about that, and it would have been the same damn thing. So unless you're actually going to sit there and show them doing a devil's tango in a sense, or have some conflict that goes on with it, scenes are just kind of pointless. You know. Now we got Leslie. Leslie and her big grand plan of exposing Turtleneck Ted. You waited 20 something years to sit there and do that. I understand that she backed off because of the lawyer, but like, did the lawyer lose power? Did the lawyer die? He had to get a new lawyer? Like, I just don't understand, like, why she waited 20 years to sit there and do this. And that's her big plan, is to sit there and expose him. Now, I do love the fact that she is a little nutty and a little batty and everything, and she is going to where they are. This is after Eva saw even when Eva saw her, she was like, "Yo, listen, you need to get out of here. You're gonna mess up your own plan." So Eva's not there party planning with Ted and everything like that. She sees Leslie, and she does all she can to sit there and try to stall Ted from walking into Leslie. Now Leslie's not there talking to Cole. I don't even know where their conversation was going. She was still listening to act like she was Sherry Carter. Then she says some stuff, and then she walks away. And eventually, Eva talks to Leslie. And apparently, I guess Eva forgot who her mom is, because her mother is more concerned with the disrespectful tone that she's getting, other than you're gonna mess up your own plan. You're gonna mess up your own plan. Now, before then, she was, doing a whole monologue like a damn DC villain, sitting there talking about what she's gonna do to Ted, the big plan, and talking about Nicole. And I'm just like, I'm starting to sit there and see why some people aren't liking the show. Like, seriously, I'm starting to see why some people are not liking the show. Now, then we get to Derek. I almost forgot about them. Derek and Ashley. This scene. This scene just signifies some problems in this show, right? Because people have been sitting there talking about how they've been boring. It's almost like they sat there and saw some of the comments and was like, oh, they were boring now? Wait till you see this scene. Take a wild guess of what they were doing. If you didn't watch, take a wild guess. Take a wild guess. Doing a damn compatibility test. Yeah, they were sitting on the couch, and she decided to include him on this compatibility test. That was the whole thing. That was it. That was literally it. Yeah. Now, I get that. I will sit there and say this much. So, I was watching one of Jabot's videos, and he was talking about the show and the pacing and how our expectations are a lot high when it comes towards these shows. We want the action and the drama right away. And soap operas has always worked on this pace of a slower pace, right? So in a sense, I did get what he was talking about. It's a new soap. right? And they want to sit there and take their time telling the story. And they feel, he feels like people don't have the same patience that they once did. And not understanding how soap operas work. And I agree with that, right? And there's a fine line between a slow pace, slow burner story, and y'all just dragging your goddamn feet, right? Like there's a fine line between those two. So I get that, right? I get that. I've always sat there and said in the beginning when I start or at some point when I started doing these soap opera reviews that sometimes I felt like I didn't always do a good job in my review because the episode didn't really give me much to work with, and I started realizing that I kind of saw that as a challenge because I feel that every soap opera, every episode, most episodes have at least something good to pull from. And for the most part, this show kind of did its thing, but stuff like that doesn't help. Now, maybe they'll want up doing better with these characters. I don't sit there and rely on Sweet Week. I don't really understand why people always sit there and say, "Well, during the Sweet Week it's going to be good," and then what happens after the Sweet Week? Hmm? Are we going to go back to more of this? Because if that's the case, then like, what's the point? What is literally the point if it's not going to be better after Sweet Week? Now, I don't think that this soap opera is terrible. I call this the soap opera like I will every other soap. And I get that there are extenuating circumstances with the show. It's new. Okay. They don't have the history that the other shows have. In a sense, let's put it this way. Unlike stuff like General Hospital and Days of Our Lives, they can't really get away with a mediocre episode. They don't have the luxury of doing that, right? Because General Hospital has been on for 6 years. Days have been on for like 50 something years, give or take. It's been on for like a month. All right. So on some level, I do have to sit there and be like, okay, I get it, slow pace and everything like that, soap opera. Y'all don't have the luxury. Let's put it this way: y'all don't even have the luxury that Bold and the Beautiful has. Bold and the Beautiful's been on for 30 something years, maybe 40 now. Y'all been on for like a month. I've heard that Procter and Gamble are used to slow paced stuff. When you're new, you got to come out with that right off the gates, right out the gates. That wasn't a pun, but still. So I don't know. I can really kind of get into it a little bit more, but I feel like this video will just be too long. So we'll talk more about this episode, my thoughts on the series, and why it's not hitting in a sense where it should hit, and the stuff that they can do to sit there and try to change that. Because again, I get it. They want to get a younger crowd. But you know, I feel like they are some of the things that they're doing is more detrimental. You know, on one hand, yes, I love the upbeat. Oh, I love the updated language. I love the fact that they talk about social media in a sense. You might want to slow down a little bit on it, but you know, you also have to sit there and understand why they want to sit there and try to also market it towards a younger crowd. It is generally the older crowd that has been sitting there keeping these shows alive as long as they have, right? And you don't want to alienate the younger crowd. You don't want to alienate the older crowd by being too heavy-handed on maybe new trends and stuff like that. You know. Anyway, I'm pretty sure there's probably more to this episode that I might have missed, but um, it's not too often I really get a chance to sit there and review the gates because live soap operas, just keeping up with all of them and making sure I have my notes prepared to do live streams and talk about this stuff. Because hell, I didn't even watch Young and the Restless, and I know in my scenario I'll be able to sit there and maybe do reviews on all of them. Of course, that would be kind of counterproductive as far as doing a live stream about them, but still. Anyway, that's pretty much all I got. Might have been some other stuff that I missed, clearly. Fill in the blanks, let me know. Let me know what your thoughts are. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.